drawing the red, shaving off breaths. Each one so heavy, each one so cumbersome, each one a light weight hanging between my lungs, in my gut. Sweat on the microphone, breaking my voice. Whenever I'm alone with you, can't talk. But isn't this weather nice? Are you okay? Should I go somewhere else and hide in my
Anybody who tells you that music is dead today, that there's no real artists out there, there's nobody doing anything relevant in music, doesn't know what they're talking about. They don't know where to look, man. It's Julianne Baker. Amazing. That's from 2016, but she's still going strong. So we haven't talked about Venezuela in a while. It's still time. Venezuela is still there, you know. It's still out there. And it's still, for the most part, being lied about, cheated, stolen from by the United States government, propaganda machine. Right? So let's take a look at what's going on right now. But let's first always have to start with Pompeo, right? Mike Pompeo, the ringleader in the gaslighting, the gaslighting effort by the United States government to convince the American people that Venezuela is a very, very desperate nation ruled by a violent dictator. Right? It's trying to deem the truth irrelevant. That's what the CIA does. The CIA steps in and says, okay, here is truth, right? For example, in the Russiagate nonsense, right? Here is the truth in the emails about what the DNC did to our great nation, to our democracy, to our election system. They cheated, right? And then when they got caught, they obfuscated the truth onto the Russians and then ultimately put that whole pile of crap on Trump. One big lie, right? Although Russiagate was a failure, the obfuscation or the deeming the truth irrelevant to make the truth it doesn't matter what the truth was. That was a huge success in Russiagate, and so it is ongoing in Venezuela. So we'll talk about the food programs. This is a quick video, but here's Mike Pompeo, then CIA director and now the Secretary of State, pretty much calling the shots in the propaganda against Venezuela.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
Entire training courses on lying, cheating, and stealing.
It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
What glory? What glory are you talking about? The ability to gaslight a nation, to rise to political prominence, and then use your voice to shatter people and shatter other nations. Well, if that's the way you want to live, right? So I want to look at what do I want to look at? I don't even know. So where the hell am I? Where am I? Oh shit. So I'm sorry. So more than 280 million people suffer from chronic. This is put out by Mike Pompeo. Right? This is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo putting out a smear piece on Nicolas Maduro and the idea of feeding his own people in the country. So more than 280 million people suffer from chronic hunger, including 94% of Venezuelans unable to cover daily food needs. Now, that's just a straight-out lie. 94% of Venezuelans suffering from meeting daily food needs. In fact, we know for a fact that it is the United States government sanctions that are causing the problem there. They have some kind of food program called CLAP, and the United States government under Pompeo are actively sanctioning and Steve Mnuchin, the Secretary of Treasury, are actively working to prevent that food from reaching the people. Why? Because it has to do with the money. It has to do with the fact that Maduro will not relinquish his power to the big oil organizations, the big corporations of the United States. They want to run it their way. It's their country. They want to use the oil to provide for their people. The United States government labels it's communism, it's socialism, it's whatever it is. It's their way of functioning, and the United States just can't have it because it doesn't suit the economic needs of the United States government. And that just really is the fact. That just simply is the fact. That's the truth of the matter. So Venezuelans refer to this as the Maduro diet. 94% of the Venezuelan people don't have enough to eat. It's a lie. While the U.S. gives millions of dollars in aid, Maduro uses food as a political weapon. That's actually the exact opposite, that the United States is using food as a political weapon. Let's watch this 45-second smear piece on Maduro. Maduro faces...
Que jefe de familia que no firme, pues no se le será despachado el beneficio de la bolsa CLA.
Sencillamente es una política de Estado, ¿ok? Alimenticia. Y entonces tú no me vas a obligar a firmar.
No me parece que yo tenga que firmar para que me traiga una.
The gist of the smear piece is that the food, the CLAP program, these bags of food that are given out. I'll show you another video where the Gray Zone did great work. They actually went to Venezuela and showed us exactly what's going on there. But this CLAP program, right? What they're trying, what Pompeo is trying to do is they're trying to smear Maduro to say that people have to sign an affidavit or some sort of petition against the United States government in order to get their bag of food. No, that's just ridiculous. It's just a ridiculous idea that the United States is preventing those people from getting those bags of food. And why? Why? What's the reason? Right? It's using starvation as a weapon. That's what it is.
Ok, usted la pagó, ¿verdad? Pero a mí, para yo seguir trayendo la comida a la comunidad, a mí me exigen que deben de firmar para el desbloqueo de la comida.
So there it is, right there. It says, while Venezuelans are starving, Maduro's corrupt regime is playing games with people's lives, coercing vulnerable citizens to sign a petition against the United States or be denied access to programs supplying affordable basic needs. It's just total rubbish is what it is, right? So let's look, and actually Venezuela just got a bump. Credibility at stake. Maduro's Venezuela given seat on UN Human Rights Council. So the UN is for Venezuela. They see the truth. The UN is on the side of truth here, where 50 nations are lining up. 50, moronic nations are lining up out of fear of U.S. sanctions against them. Right? The UN just gave Venezuela a seat at the Human Rights Council. That's a hell of a thing to do. So let's look at this reporting by the Gray Zone. This is Ben Norton, and
reporter at the Gray Zone. Ben, at the Gray Zone, we've been covering the U.S.-backed coup and economic warfare attempt on Venezuela since the start. You just come back from Venezuela after a few months. Talk to us about your impressions.
Yeah, this was my second trip to Venezuela this year, and I will say that in some ways, nothing really has changed, which is a good sign. There's peace, there's political stability, people have enough to eat, they have enough to survive, they're getting the bare necessities. But at the same time, the economic situation is more difficult. It's absolutely true. And corporate media outlets say Venezuela is a humanitarian catastrophe. There's this new Jack Ryan series. It's all just ridiculous propaganda. But it's true that there's a major economic crisis going on in Venezuela. And for a lot of average Venezuelans, prices are out of control, inflation is really bad, and of course one of the main causes of this, not the only cause, but the largest factor behind the economic crisis is the embargo. The Trump administration declared a full economic embargo of Venezuela on August 5th, and before that, the Trump administration had very aggressive sanctions against Venezuela that, of course, were started under the Obama administration. And people are really feeling the impact. Now, what's interesting, though, is that the people who are impacted the least by the sanctions are the opposition, of course, the ones who are supporting the sanctions. And the people who support the government tend to be disproportionately poor. And what's really wild is whenever I was in a working class barrio, whenever I was walking around Caracas, poor and working class people are much, much more likely to support the government, much, much more likely to support Maduro. And in the eastern rich part of Caracas, known as Chacao, a different district with a different local government, which is controlled by the opposition, there is staunch opposition to the government. But ironically, at the same time, the faction that the U.S. government has chosen behind the coup, the Juan Guaido folks, are actually quite unpopular, increasingly unpopular, and we've at the Gray Zone reported on their corruption. But what's actually wild is I went to an opposition rally, and there were like 50 people there. The opposition, the coup attempt has really fizzled out, and the opposition is not unified by these figures like Juan Guaido, who many of whom are in exile. Opposition figures in Miami and Colombia who are lobbying for aggressive sanctions that are hurting average people, and it's pretty clear. The effects are quite obvious.
Speaking of sanctions, the U.S. keeps imposing them on different aspects of the Venezuelan state.
Sanctions and embargo. Now listen to what they say about the CLAP program. Here you go. This is the fundamental argument that Pompeo is making, that the Venezuelan people are starving, they're eating their dogs, there's nothing to eat. It's just a lie.
Recently, again, the Trump administration imposed new sanctions on CLAP, the Venezuelan food program that gives boxes of food to...
So again, Pompeo is saying that the United States government is supporting this food distribution with aid and such. And here you go. The evidence is that the United States government is interfering with the food distribution in someone else's country.
Millions of Venezuelans every single month. Explain what's going on there.
The CLAP food program is extremely important. More than 80% of the public in Venezuela receives these regular CLAP food boxes. And I went to a distribution site when I was there on this trip. We're going to have a report at the Gray Zone showing how every single 15 days in some communities or every 30 days in other communities, the government helps provide these giant boxes of food with major staples: wheat, corn, condensed milk, lentils, oil, things that people, rely on, the staples to eat to survive. And it's not just government supporters that receive these boxes. It's the vast majority of the population, more than 6 million families. So the Trump administration has decided to target this program as a way of attacking the government by really just using hunger as a weapon. That is the strategy. It's the same strategy the Trump administration is using against Iran, against Nicaragua and other countries. And Venezuela is still heavily reliant on food imports. But a new development that's interesting. Now actually, we were in Venezuela in February and March, and I returned in the last 2 months, in August and September. And what's interesting is that the food boxes under the CLAP program have increased in size. There's more of them. They're bigger in frequency as well. And also what's interesting is that now the food organized communities, like the way the CLAP program is organized, is very efficient because thousands upon thousands of people, volunteers who are not paid, have worked together to organize their communities to make sure people are not going hungry. And it's actually an example of the community stepping up and working in hand with the government. It's not just the government, doing this top-down approach. It very much is bottom-up. And it's been very impressive to see that as the crisis has gotten worse, the community has actually stepped up and organized in alliance with the government.
That is the exact opposite of what the United States government is telling us. Here's an eyewitness on the ground, credible. These guys are credible at Gray Zone, and this is what they're seeing on the ground. But it's in direct. It's not only what they're saying. So you're seeing that the people are rising up and coming together as a community to hold out the Trump administration sanctions on their country. What are we doing there? What is the point? Where is the logic behind sanctioning and punishing Venezuela a sovereign nation. It only comes back to what I mentioned before. It's about business. It's about oil. It's about you can't live and let live. You can't leave these people alone with all that property and all that resource to have good lives for themselves. No, you got to suffer just like the rest of the quote free world, and work your ass off until you die. Okay? Now, you want to call that some hide behind some ideology, then you really don't know what you're talking about, So again, the UN is with us, with the Venezuelan people. Us, who's us? We don't even know who us is anymore. But Maduro's government, no longer recognized as legitimate by the United States and around 50 other countries, had sought a return to the 47-member panel to counter an image of international isolation. In other words, Maduro's regime is widely popular. The elected president of Venezuela is widely popular amongst the people and is recognized by the United States, the United Nations Human Rights Council, the United Nations, right? And now has appointed a Maduro led coalition to be part of that Human Rights Council. So I don't know. Marcus Conte reporting. It's just again the truth. What is truth? We know the truth, but we have this incredible campaign in this country to obfuscate the truth, to smother the truth, to make the truth go away, to deem the truth irrelevant. Now, you know the truth about Venezuela, but does that change anything? Does that change U.S. policy? 50% of the country will digest it and still scream from the rooftops without any evidence that Venezuela's they're eating their kids there. They're just Maduro is a brutal dictator with no evidence. Right? So Marcus Conte reporting here with this update on Venezuela. Let's let Julianne Baker take us out.
Marathon